Yo, this is Real Sankara Hours. Real Sankara Hours. Follow us at Sankara Hours on Twitter. Subscribe to our Patreon, www.patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours. We're also on SoundCloud for our RSS feed. Go to our Podbean, realsankarahours.podbean.com. Before we do the regular sort of announcements, this episode we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and also specifically the sort of recent calls to open the economy back up, even though there's still a massive pandemic going on and the need for social distancing is still very, very, very important. So this is Adam Hudson. Follow me at AdamHudson5 on Twitter.
And this is Peter MGunn. Follow me at MGunnPeter. And yeah, days are bleeding into each other. I don't know how to feel about any of this stuff anymore. I mean, I don't really. I've settled into being a recluse pretty well, and I don't have to feel bad about it because it's what I'm supposed to do. I used to feel bad about becoming one, but I'm doing my patriotic duty right now, so that's fine. But what's weird to me is that when you do go out, you're sometimes reminded that there are other parts of the country where it's like, they're still basically living regular society. I mean, certainly the homeless people I run into, I mean, their lives haven't changed as much. I mean, and other people like those idiot protesters who, I mean, most of them are just like taking cue. Most of this is astroturfed as fuck, but you can't astroturf. We got to develop the astroturf metaphor because it's like there's supposed to be a receptive ground for the astroturf to take hold.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
A receptive concrete. I don't know. But these people, these fucking idiots who, one of the good things about the Trump era is like these people can never tell anyone they don't understand anything about politics anymore. But yeah, it's like I guess I understand, you got to think about things from the perspective of an idiot, and that's what liberals are always unable to do because they can't ever imagine thinking about politics not as a smart person. And on some level, they don't really believe idiots should be allowed to participate in politics. And they don't really, in the actual, sense of participatory democracy or whatever. But they have opinions and they're pandered to enough. And the veneer of democracy is still barely maintained in some way, such that they think they're political actors. And so they do this shit where it's like, yeah, if you have, if you're not poor, in America, you've been told it is your God-given right to have every convenience you could ever imagine catered to you. And that, in the land of plenty, there should never be any, interruption of your greatest material luxuries. And so so the idea that like anything like this happens, because, when they talk about like bread lines in the Soviet Union or whatever, it's like people are just waiting in line at a store. I mean, I have to do that now, right? But it's also like there were always bread lines in the sense that like you walk past a soup kitchen,
Yep.
in any city, like people are waiting in line to get food, right? So, but these people think that they should never have to wait in a line because they're like the real Americans, whatever. So the fact that they do annoys them and they see it as an injustice. And, I don't know how much any of that matters in the sense of like, certainly not going to, I don't know if they're actually providing the political cover the Republicans think they would be. But it also may not matter because they could just they're basically deciding that like, yeah, we can't, the market won't bear this. And, we have to do whatever the market says because it is the highest god. I mean, economists are the high priests of the day, and they operate in this sort of mystical authority. So if the market says this, somehow we have to abide by it. And some of that is ideology, but it's also just like the American state isn't functional to even step in and manage the economy like that at this point, because we've spent
Right.
the latter half of the 20th century and all of the 21st, developing it such that it could never do that. And that's the whole point of the neoliberal project. So, on some level, it's like, yeah, I don't fucking know.
So, yeah, I want to jump in and I mean, one reason why, okay, because the argument that, a lot of these morons who are like, oh my god, there's this fucking clip of the mayor of Los Angeles, of Las Vegas, not the mayor of Las Vegas, and she was calling for basically opening up fucking casinos in Las Vegas because and
I think she literally said we'll be the test case, and it's like I don't think anyone who works at a casino is like, yeah, no, sign me up, but I want to be a lab rat for the worst industry in the entire world.
I mean, and also next to cruise ships, I mean, casinos are other petri dishes for viruses because all those people smoking, drinking, touching the same slot machines, and
turn Las Vegas into a leper colony.
Yeah, and so, but here's the thing is so their argument is that hey, we need to jumpstart the economy back again and get people back to work at businesses. But here's the thing, even if let's say theoretically the entire country, quote unquote, goes back to work and opens up, right? Like we open up the economy again. There's no guarantee that everyone is going to go back to work because, okay, on one hand you see Florida opened up beaches, which is fucking stupid, but I hate to say it, kind of expected from Florida. Sorry, but it's no surprise that the state of Florida would do something like that, especially given.
Oh yeah, Florida has never had a functioning theory of governance.
No, and also I'm still not over Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman killing him in Florida, so I'm still not over that. Anyway, so and I think believe Georgia, the governor of Georgia called for I think either he called for or it already happened. Reopening the state of Georgia from lockdown. But even if you do that, there is a poll done by Associated Press and the University of Chicago. The majority of Americans support keeping the lockdown. So closing bars and restaurants, 76% favor closing them versus 12% opposed. Requiring Americans to stay at home, 80% of Americans support requiring people to stay at home. Limit gatherings to 10 or fewer, 82% support that. So even if you open the economy back, even if you open up businesses and all that back up, there's no guarantee that people are going to go to those businesses because people are probably going to be too scared because they're not going to want to go outside and potentially get coronavirus and get sick.
Yeah.
So they're assuming that everyone is just going to go back to Fuddruckers or Cheesecake Factory or whatever the fuck to stuff their face with whatever fucking food that these businesses are selling. That's why I think that's one of the biggest reasons why the call for opening the economy back up is so stupid, is because it's not guaranteed that the majority of people in this country are going to go to those businesses, or even probably they don't even want to return to work because, again, it's reasonable. People are afraid of getting the virus. I was just out, I had to pick my mom up from the clinic earlier today, and I saw when I was driving around, more and more people are wearing face masks. So Contra Costa County, where I live, just had a county-wide order, which basically mandates people to wear face masks when you go out in public. So everyone's wearing a face mask. Most people are wearing face masks. And a lot of stuff is kind of dormant. I mean, people are still driving around because where I live is still spread out. So in order to get from one place to another, you have to drive. But Um, what, like, it's gonna be hard to go from people getting used to living under quarantine to going back to like whatever period of normal that these idiotic right wing hyper capitalist
Well,
business people and politicians want.
yeah, it's stupid because we're basically in the kind of like a wartime mentality, and it's like,
Right.
if you're, I mean, war is great for the economy if the fighting's not happening on your territory, but if it is, then like, yeah, your economy's in the toilet. Um, and yeah, imagine like during the middle of the Civil War, there were a whole bunch of people who are like, we need to keep the saloons open. We need to, people need to be, even though there's a civil war going on, we still need to be able to go out and get our hair cut or whatever. I can't cut your hair at home. I don't know.
Right.
But that's the thing. And it's like, look, even if you open it up, I mean, you can't it'll like the economy's not going to come roaring back or whatever. We're not going to get to the kind of, wealth accumulation that we were, but, of course, the people at the top are, making bank off of this because they're just consolidating and they're going to buy up everyone else that goes under. But my point is that, you open it back up, diseases spike, cases spike, you have to close it back down, you open it back up.
Yeah.
It's basically like, basically just trying to, they're basically propping the whole, I'm convinced basically that they're propping the whole thing up until the election, and they're, right now everything is just like Band-Aids and popsicle sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just, they just got to push it over the line. And then, after Trump gets reelected, then whatever, he's most likely going to get reelected. Sorry,
I think I believe it was the CDC chief or somewhat a similar official who said that, well, warned that there could be a second wave that's even worse than this one. There is one bit of good news from California. So there is a researcher who said that because California implemented shelter-in-place policies largely, mostly earlier than the rest of the country, the researcher said that California has, quote, crushed the curve, so the whole flattening the curve to make sure that our hospital system is not overwhelmed. So right now we're at the point where like our hospital system is pretty good. So that is hopeful. So it shows like, okay,
congratulations, California. Some of us live in terrible states.
Yeah, well, I don't like to stan any kind of politician, including someone like Gavin Newsom, but I will say Gavin Newsom, I'll give him credit for having a functioning brain and some common sense to deal with a pandemic. Whereas contrast that with the mayor of Las Vegas, who's like, yeah, let's open up the casinos and we'll just have some social distancing and we'll just let the free market decide it. Blah 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 blah. Like contrast like Newsom, who's like, okay, everyone wear face masks, close down businesses, social distancing. Well, at least do that, and so far it's worked. Versus, yeah, a fucking idiot like the mayor of Las Vegas. And
well, I mean, I get in the sense it's like that's literally the entire economy of Las Vegas,
right?
So
yeah.
The whole thing is that like, yeah, if there were, in an alternative reality where America was a functioning nation state, and we aren't. We just are still getting enough imperial super profits to paper over how non-functional everything is. And when that starts to dry up, which it will soon, because I think the end of the petrodollar is coming, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, it's like that's the only thing that you have. So, my point is that in an alternative version, yeah, the government could like step in and basically, provide for people's needs such that, yeah, we don't, UBI and, just keep everything at the lowest possible level so that people can live and survive and ride this thing out. But we don't have a governmental system. We don't have a state, structure that is capable of doing that. And I mean, part of that is neoliberalism, part of it is the federal system, and part of it is the way those two feed into each other, where it's like call out the federal government to and let the states do everything, but like viruses don't care about states, people, and like and dividing America up on states is not how the American economy works at all. So it's always been a game, basically by the right, but the Democrats, are always too feckless. They go along with it, and now they're starting to sort of weaponize it in their own right.
So I want to jump in, and so I kept saying the mayor of Las Vegas. Her name is Caroline Goodman. Here are a couple lines from her interview with Anderson Cooper, just so you guys get a sense of the kind of genius that's running Las Vegas. One of her lines was, "I'd love everything open because I think we've had viruses for years that have been here. We've never closed down the United States. We never closed down Nevada. We've never closed down Las Vegas because that's our job." She also said, "I've lived a long life. I grew up in the heart of Manhattan. I know what it's like to be with subways and crammed into elevators." Well, you also didn't, I'm pretty sure, so she was born in 1939.
Oh my God.
That was 20 years after the Spanish flu pandemic. So she has not lived during a pandemic.
The mayor of Las Vegas is 80?
Yeah.
Jesus.
And she also does not represent her constituency, because there's an article in NBC News where a lot of Las Vegas workers are basically pushing back on her comments. And one of the things they said was, "We're not test subjects, we're people, we are employees." This is a quote from a bartender. So even the workers who work at these Las Vegas casinos and other establishments, a lot of them don't want to go back to work. So that's another problem, is that, like, let's say you try to open up the economy back up. Do the workers want to return to work and risk being exposed to a virus?
Well, most workers don't have a choice. The Culinary Workers Union might be able to weigh in. I don't know if they have actual political efficacy beyond, doing whatever Harry Reid tells them to. But I would say that the idea that she's running Las Vegas, that's not true. The mayor does not run Las Vegas. She is responding to the people she's accountable to, which is casino owners.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Yeah, they can only take so much before, the market can only bear so much.
Here's another thing she said. "First of all, I don't gamble. I used to gamble. I don't have the time." Well, now it sounds like she's gambling with the lives of fucking people in her city. And there are going to be people. Obviously there are people who, especially essential workers, have no choice but to work. Because again, I think, also what this pandemic is revealing is what jobs are actually necessary to keep actual society running, like grocery stores, people in truckers, people who deliver mail. The post office right now is in danger of basically shutting down. So we need especially if you're going to be, during months of quarantine, you're going to need stuff like basic supplies. So people are going to have to rely on mail. Right? So that means FedEx workers, UPS workers. So
the Republicans have been trying to destroy the post office for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're salivating about this. I don't know if they're really going to be able to get away with it. That's always their end goal. That's their ultimate victory. That's the brass ring or whatever, is them destroying the post office, privatizing the post office. But I don't know. It's God,
I'm sorry. I'm just reading through these fucking things she said. Another thing she said: "We're not getting the truth. I know over the years, going back to the 1950s with the atomic bomb. Don't worry about more testing in Nevada. You'll all be fine. Take a shower." What the fuck?
Fucking boomer.
God
man.
Damn. Oh, fuck.
She's not even a boomer. She's older than
that.
But
holy.
I don't understand that. Or de Blasio's gonna hold a parade for essential workers. Are you insane? Stop. Why would you hold a parade, a socially distanced parade? Like what the hell is wrong with these people? I don't get that.
And what's the point of, I mean, look at, before Bernie Sanders dropped out, the Democrats still wanted to hold elections, even when it was unsafe to do so, which, I mean, I feel like if this was done in any other country, we probably would have invaded. If this was happening, like, let's say, Venezuela, we would say, oh, this is a corrupt regime that is putting its citizens in danger. Therefore, America and the rest of the free world, we have to invade Venezuela because they're being run by a corrupt government. But now, like, our government's like, hey, let's have elections, even though there's a pandemic and it's unsafe to go out. And if you go out, you're probably going to die. We should have fucking elections because, yay, democracy! Yay!
Yeah, I mean, since you brought up Venezuela, I'm trying to look up what their response to it was, and it was just like, yeah, they suspended all rent payments for 6 months. They basically did the things that, like, that's the dream scenario. So, you know, say what you will about Venezuela, but they keep on ticking somehow.
Also,
the Trump administration is using this period to really put the hammer down, and I think maybe since we're talking, they want they ordered Chevron to shutter all Venezuela operations, which is kind of insane. And this is one of the things, sidebar, that I always wondered about Venezuela. It's like, why did the PDVSA's production decline so heavily? There's never been an actual reason. It's always just say mismanagement, but stuff like that doesn't happen by accident. Anyway, the interesting thing that I didn't expect to happen was the crash of oil prices. Which
right.
Makes sense, but it was fascinating to think about because there are like 20 tankers just hanging out outside California still. Are they still there?
I don't know, but from what I understand, I think the reason Dylan Ratigan did a really... I know some of the left have issues with Jimmy Dore, but I will say Jimmy Dore and his interviews with Dylan Ratigan, if you're trying to understand the economic response and all those details, the interviews that Jimmy Dore does with Dylan Ratigan are very, very good. But the way Dylan Ratigan explained it was basically... he was explaining futures trading. So in futures trading, you can trade commodities. So one of those commodities is...
it's speculation. It's like based on what the price is going to be.
Exactly, yeah. So basically, the pandemic has essentially fucked up the futures market, essentially, because they didn't anticipate... Because futures trading is based on future speculations of what the price is going to be. So if you're trying to... future trading is basically... You buy a contract at one point in time to purchase the delivery of said commodity in the future. So since oil prices fluctuate, every month, you can lock in a price to be like, okay, I'm going to buy this contract to purchase oil at X amount of dollars sometime in January. It's in January or whatever, right? So that was all assuming that the normal market forces would play out the way they are. No one anticipated a pandemic, which would shut down the entire global economy. So, because the pandemic...
Some people anticipated it, but did some insider trading.
But because the pandemic, what it did, since no one's driving, people are driving around less, so there's a demand shortage. There's a massive demand shortage throughout the economy. So there's a massive demand shortage when it comes to oil. And so that's basically led to technically an oversupply of oil. So yeah, like as you're saying,
they literally don't have anywhere to put it.
Right.
So it is literally, and yeah, I was reading about this and thinking about it last night, and I finally started to understand the importance of the petrodollar, which we'll get into. But it is literally like an oil tanker holds like 2 million barrels of oil. And the average Venezuela, I know, produces like it's like 1.4 million barrels a day, which is to say doesn't fill up a tanker. Saudi Arabia's oil production, I can look it up, but I'm sure it's around like 3 million barrels a day or something, which is to say, like, little more than just like one or two tankers.
And that also is a major reason why
Or
what explains all of American foreign policy in the Middle East is largely to secure the control the flow of cheap oil to the global economy and making sure the United States has control over the spigot in Gulf oil. So hence why we have such a strong relationship with Israel and why we have a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia and why we're willing to back, a very vicious government in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the oil market ticked up a little bit because Trump did some saber rattling with Iran, and in the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz is always it's important because so Saudi Arabia produces 12 billion barrels a day. Fine, so that's like 6 tankers.
Wait, you said 12 million or 12 billion?
12 million barrels per day.
Okay, that's a lot. Yeah, that's still.
Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot, and they export, I guess, 9 million. So they are, I don't know. Just looking up the basic statistics. Let's say they export like 3 tankers worth of oil a day, right? There's not that many. I just, then that oil has to pass through the Strait of. Those tankers have to pass through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
Where which is bordered by Iran,
mm-hmm.
and so it's very, and the U.S. military basically is the traffic cop there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. To make sure everything goes through.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, traffic cop. Yeah, that's basically the function of the American war machine in the Middle East. Yeah.
That's what the Navy does. I mean, that's what the British Navy basically did.
Mm-hmm.
They're but. Yeah, so then they get to America, and there's no place to put it, and so it's just there, which it's just hanging out there. But it also made me think about if Americans by not driving could just crash the price of oil. I just started to think what if we actually did consumption strikes like that? I mean, that may be the only thing that the American masses could do to affect global politics is if there was just a huge consumption strike. If nobody drove for 1 week, that could fuck some things up, or everyone drove as little as possible for 1 week. I don't know.
I want to just bring this up to contextualize, but it also just how crazy it is. So. Today is Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. So every time unemployment numbers come up, therefore the number of people who applied for unemployment the week before. So basically the numbers that come out this week are, I guess it basically takes some time to count up the number of unemployment claims for the previous week.
It's you have to file every week is the thing.
Yeah.
And so I assume that's I have to, every Sunday I go online, fill out a little form.
Yeah.
And that's how, and so I assume it's that's the amount of people that did that every week. And so,
so
it's not necessarily new people, but
every week, here's the thing, every week it keeps growing. So, I think, last week, or the week prior, the last, hold up, let me bring it up. I think it was so I think the week prior 5.2 million people filed for unemployment, and so that brought the unemployment numbers to 22 million. So this week, as of April 23rd, 2020, a total of 26.5 million people are out of work. And this is important because the jobs that were lost during the Great Recession, the 2008-2009 Great Recession, 8.7 million. So 3 times as many, so far within 5 weeks since the pandemic really kind of took hold in the United States, within 5 weeks, we've had more people go on unemployment. 3 times as many jobs that were lost within 5 weeks.
In history, because unemployment insurance didn't exist in the Depression.
Well,
So.
and also, but here's the thing, like, so remember everyone was talking about the recovery, right, since the Great Recession? So 22.4 million jobs were created since the Great Depression. So basically, all the jobs that were created during the recovery are all gone. More so basically 26.5 million people are out of work right now as of April 23rd. That is more than the jobs that were gained since the end of the Great Recession. So basically, all of the job gains since the Great Recession are all gone. So we're basically like, we're in a worse position than like the 2008 crash economically in terms of like unemployment. And like I said, like these unemployment numbers keep growing and growing. So it could like, again, this is just as of April 23rd, but I'm pretty sure like those numbers are going to keep growing week by week. As this shutdown, yeah, because again, like, you know,
Well, that's what they're afraid of.
yeah,
And you know, for some reason, being on unemployment just like really makes some people just like murderously angry, and I don't get it because whatever. It's like I said, officially became a man in America the first time I got my unemployment check. But yeah, it's a hard thing to wrap your head around because you're like, oh well, everyone will just go back to work when this is over, but this is not going to be over, capital O, for a long time.
Mm-mm.
And so yeah, there will be things that, you know, there will be periodic reopenings basically to keep the markets going, but that won't necessarily translate to the, you know, that doesn't mean that like everyone's going back to work or whatever. And, you know, so it is like this could be really bad, and people, and you know, I don't know, nobody knows what's going to happen really. We're all this is like putting neoliberalism to the ultimate test, and we're really seeing what's going to happen. But I wanted to focus on the petrodollar, which
yes,
is actually, this is the whole thing. It's like, you know, whatever. People can say whatever they want about Russia and China, but I am perfectly fine with American hegemony collapsing, even if it empowers them or whatever. And the other thing is that
Peter, is that why people call you a tanky?
No, that's for my robust defense of Joseph Stalin. But what was happening before this was that there's been this whole thing where like there's the American shale boom, the oil boom. It's like in North Dakota, right? And sometimes you even see like stupid lefties being like, "Yeah, no, we drill our way into energy independence, and then like evil Saudi Arabia is gonna collapse." And that's not how any of this works. But Russia and Saudi Arabia are like, they don't like the American shale industry, and that was the thing they said back in 2014 when they flooded the market the first time, was that they were trying to drive them out. Let me just read. I'll just start reading from this because
wait, sorry, what are you reading from?
Oilprice.com. If you really want to understand what's happening, stop reading. Don't even read like lefty. If you want to understand like what's going on in the world, you should read like oil news websites, even over The Economist. But it says Saudi Arabia has been in the news recently for several interconnected reasons. Underlying it all is a spendthrift country that is rapidly becoming insolvent. While the House of Saud remains strongly resistant to change, a mixture of reality and power play is likely to dominate domestic politics in the coming years, following the ascendancy of King Salman. This is probably from 2015, but there's still some things to be gleaned from it. Okay, this is fun. It's hard to imagine Saudi Arabia embracing the changes recommended by McKinsey. Saudi Arabia hires like McKinsey and all these consulting firms to make them seem palatable to Western businesses. But the only thing that props them up is the oil company, which they've been trying to do an IPO for a while, and they've been selling it off bit by bit and trying to like turn into basically like a nation of venture capitalists. Saudi money is like big in Silicon Valley, but okay, let's get to the important stuff. While the Arab countries flowed themselves on oceans of petrodollars 40 years ago, they have little need for them now. So we must turn our attention to China, which is well positioned to act as white knight to Saudi Arabia. China's sovereign wealth fund could easily swallow the Aramco stake, and there are good reasons why it should. A quick deal would help stabilize a desperate financial and political situation on the edges of China's rapidly growing Asian interests and keep Saudi Arabia on side as an energy supplier. China has dollars to dispose, and a mutual arrangement would herald a new era of tangible cooperation. The U.S. can only stand and stare as China teases Saudi Arabia away from America's sphere of influence. In truth, trade matters more than just talk, which is why highly indebted America finds itself on the back foot all the time in every financial skirmish with China. Future currency policies pursued by both China and Saudi Arabia and their interaction will affect the dollar. The point I want to make is that, the U.S. basically has the petrodollar keeping up its global hegemony. The petrodollar is just that Saudi Arabia sells all of its oil in dollars, and since they're one of the biggest producers, any country that buys oil from them has to buy it in dollars, basically. And that's what has been able to keep the dollar relatively stable. But, that's a shitty deal for every other country. And China has been sort of pushing, a few people to trade in yuans or whatever they call it.
Yeah, I think it's the yuan. I believe that's the name.
Well,
of the
there's like a different official word for it.
Oh, okay.
The yuan, or sometimes the European Union does this, but if it ever, the more shocks to the system like this and the more unstable the US is, the less it is like looking that our political stability, and this is one of the things that people need to understand, about the two-party system and why it's always been a scam, because our empire, one of our empire's strengths is the political stability, which is based on the idea that nothing fundamentally changes, right? So as America gets more unstable, as it gets more unequal and all this stuff, it will on some level affect our ability to project power and maintain our status as the global hegemon. And that could happen a lot more quickly than anyone really thinks, because China is basically they're prepared for this moment. Whatever opinion you have about them, they're ready. They're not shirking from the historical opportunities that are presented right now. And America, I don't know if there's really anything America could do to, present to stop the empire from declining, but we're certainly going to find out what we're going to try to do.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on China just in general, I'll just make this quick point because when I was a teenager I traveled to China mostly because my mom got she was offered a English teaching job. I mean, my mom's a retired public school teacher, but during the early 2000s, she had a teaching job there. So that's why I spent time in China. And I think a lot of times in the West, when people talk about China, and I think it particularly came to fore during the early stages of this pandemic, and I think there's a good article in CNN that was basically saying because people were saying that coronavirus, COVID-19, came from these really dangerous and nasty wet markets in China, but wet markets in China are not like the way they're talking about it are very, very overblown. It's just basically a wet market. It's called a wet market because the floor is largely wet, and you get it's just a normal place where people just get meat. Usually, that's what a wet market in China for the most part is. So, I think a lot of times when it comes to China, I think sometimes critiques of China on the left, I think could do a better job of not being too mired in sort of Western caricatures of how China is. But at the same time, like I think I also don't like romanticizing China and its intentions because, especially as a Pan Africanist, I am kind of concerned about China's role in Africa in the sense that like there are reports of China banning black people from I think a McDonald's, and so I think when it comes to China's relationship with Africa, I think there needs to be like like I think a sharper critique of whether or not China has Africa's best interest at heart. But I think, like Peter, what you laid out, I think in terms of the global big picture, I think it's a good assessment because, because China is rising as an economic power. You are going to see like basically China and the United States like butting heads, and so I think that'll remain. That's something to pay attention to, and especially when it comes to U.S. militarism in the Asia Pacific, particularly in the Philippines and Japan, like our base in Okinawa. The U.S. war machine is positioned in the Asia Pacific to counter the influence of China. But the thing is, like, we're on China's doorstep in the Asia Pacific when it comes to like the Philippines and Japan. Like, we're right, in South Korea. So, I just wanted to say that because I think like sometimes like when the left when the left critiques China, I think there are a lot of legitimate reasons to criticize China, but I think sometimes like people will often knowingly or unknowingly repeat just sort of like weird stereotypes that they have about China. So I think that is important because especially there are hate crimes, a sad number of hate crimes against Asian people, particularly Chinese people, because of this pandemic, people are looking at Chinese people and Asian people as like, oh, they're the reason why this virus is here is because it came from China, and so I just wanted to kind of make a note of that because I think it is important to have like reasoned critiques, but also not like be wary of like, okay, are these critiques repeating stereotypes about China, and also like are you repeating maybe CIA talking points? Because that is like, that is something to keep in mind. Not even just for China, but for any other country. Like, because I try to sometimes when the left debates like other governments that are usually in the United States crosshairs, I'm sort of like, okay, I think there's a reason to critique these governments, but at the same time, it's like, wait, are your critiques grounded because you want to have regime change in China, or you want to like have like some other Cold War with China, or like what's the intention here? So I just wanted to like make a note of that, but I do think like the sort of power play, the economic power play between the United States and China, particularly as it relates to the global economy. I think that's something to really pay attention to.
Yeah, I will also say that like China's intentions kind of don't matter in the sense that like it's not about like what is in a nation's heart. It's literally about like what they have the capability to do, what they have the political will to do, and what they can do. And China can never do the kind of imperialism and colonization that the West did in Africa.
No, and also China, like, to be clear, when it comes to China and Africa, like, a lot of their, from what I understand, a lot of their involvement in Africa is largely, a huge chunk of it is building infrastructure, but China isn't, like, they don't have the massive number of military bases that the United States has, right? So there's a real important distinction between what China's doing and the United States, because I think sometimes even when people talk about China and Africa, sometimes even that's overblown. But at the same time, I think it's important to have like, I think good critiques, but like also not repeat stereotypes and U.S. government / CIA talking points. So that's just, I want to make a note of that, because I think like sometimes when the left talks about like China and these other countries, like
Yeah.
it can sometimes go in that direction. So I just want to caution against that.
Yeah, and people really need to be on guard on this now and in the coming days and the near future, because they're gonna. I mean, they're already doing it now. Um, wars in the Middle East are really just little maintenance actions. We're never gonna. I don't know. I'm still kind of. I still don't even understand why we thought what we did in Iraq was ever going to achieve whatever outcome we said we wanted. I mean, but the U.S. empire is not going to allow someone to dethrone it peacefully. So at some level, I don't know if it's going to be proxy wars. The Asia Pacific is going to heat up, I'm pretty sure, in the next couple of decades. And people need to be really smart and not stupid about, whatever you think China's doing in Xinjiang or whatever. Like, it human rights doesn't, like, I'm sorry, but human rights doesn't matter. It's not an important part of any like country's historic calculations or the way that informs the way they act. It's always just a fig leaf. It's always just PR. They don't care about that stuff. That's not how state power operates. And though it's true that information warfare is becoming a dominant thing in international relations, and that is affecting things. But
and also like, I mean, our relationship with China is like, the United States still relies on China for cheap labor. I mean, like particularly
but China. Well, fun thing about Foxconn. Foxconn's actually a Taiwanese company.
Oh, interesting. But isn't the facility? It's in China, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, they're also in Wisconsin now. So
globalization, baby.
Yeah. The industrial Midwest is getting like, this is the other thing people have to realize is like, the America is gonna get penetrated by foreign capital. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know we're like super masculine, and so the idea of us being penetrated by anything gives people a lot of nightmares. But it's already happening. We won't be able to keep foreign capital out, even as So that is the one thing I will say about like the imperial core model is. In the imperial core model, I mean the idea that there are, the set of nations that constitute the imperial core, mainly the U.S., Western Europe, and Japan. Then there are sort of the semi-peripheries, which is, like Eastern Europe or something, or maybe China's in semi-periphery. And then there's like the absolute periphery, which is, the poorest countries in the world, the third world, as it were. That sort of formation is it's gonna change a little bit because, you need war. Like, you need wars to decimate populations to prevent countries from being economic actors. That's a big reason why imperial wars happen. And, that's what if like all this, I really find the people who are like, we need to get Chuff on China. That's we'll call that.
Tough on China, right?
Chuff on China. We need to get tough on China, but we don't want war. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? You can't. That's
what Joe Biden was basically saying in the debate with Bernie Sanders.
As Outcast says, like, don't pull the thing out unless you plan to bang. Like, don't talk about this shit if you're not willing to go through with it. If what you want is to put China back in its place, quote unquote, then you need to be upfront about that. I'm tired of these people who act like China gets a say in this, and they're not going to just be like, oh yeah, no, we're fine being the world's workshop. No, that's not what they're doing. That's not where they're trying to go. And you can't I mean, you'll literally have to, you'll have to do a lot more than just like stupid sanctions and trade wars to get them back to doing it, get them back to that place. So I don't know what people are talking about when they say stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, also, well, here's the thing about like the whole human rights discourse in like how I, I've covered Guantanamo. I still cover Guantanamo, and like what's interesting is that like usually the things that the U.S. does, the kind of violence that we do, usually don't get categorized as human rights violations. I mean, in an ideal world, right? Like theoretically, human rights, I think, are a good idea and worth aspiring to. But in the current reality that we exist in, um, I think the human rights discourse gets kind of weaponized. I mean, I don't know if enough about um China's treatment of Muslims. I'd rather talk to someone who's a lot more educated on that than I am. But I will say, I mean, like, look, I think it's fair to say, like, okay, maybe like one reasonable critique of China would be like, okay, do you think like should Tibet be independent or not? I think that's a fair discussion to have, right? But at the same time, I think when it comes to how the human rights discourse is used, um, like there are no real there's no there people are not using human rights discourse because they believe in the principle of human rights. Like that's the thing. Like no, like in the way human rights discourse gets used, it's always going to be political. And so, um, uh, so when we talk about like human rights when it comes to the United States versus China versus Russia, um, I just think like that's something important to keep in mind is that like human rights gets used and manipulated for very very political reasons. I will say just to kind of round out my comment on because I think that the whole China and Africa and China like that could be a whole other episode, but I want to try to because we're getting close to the end of this. I want to try to wrap this up because I wanted to say something about black politics, but I will say like I think when it comes to China and Africa, I think one debate that I'm particularly interested in is um Africa as a continent being self-sufficient and to what extent is China facilitating that? And to be honest, I don't think China is really helping Africa become self-sufficient in terms of economic self-sufficiency, particularly on the model of Thomas Sankara. I don't think China is really helping Africa to be self-sufficient. So I think like particularly in light of COVID-19 and China's treatment of black people in China, there is this discussion of like, okay, what is Africa's relationship going to be with China? Is China really a quote unquote friend of the African countries? And so I would like to see Africa and the entire diaspora be self-sufficient. And that would also mean like, okay, we're going to have to reassess our relationship with China because I don't think China, under its current system, I don't think China is really, in terms of its goal and how it operates, I don't think China is really trying to work toward like third world solidarity in the way that was seen post Bandung conference. So I think that also needs to be kept in mind because China is not like the Bandung conference China. So in terms of in terms of how China relates with Africa, like it's not out of a sense of pursuing third world solidarity and like that kind of goal. So that's a whole discussion, but I wanted to kind of like just wrap that up. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I will weigh in briefly to say that yeah, the sort of Pan-Africanist, dream future, China's not going. That is not necessarily China's ultimate goal, but at the same time, I think that they have a strategic political interest in the sense that they need to be seen as being beneficial to the continent, and so it's not the same thing as colonialism where it was like, yeah, no, we're here for our reasons. I mean, that like that is so that's important to understand. And also with sort of, yeah, I mean, there is plenty of anti-blackness in China as there is all over the world. I think it's important when you like, it's very easy to like take something that happened to someone and then, blow it up in the sense of like, it's not the, anti-blackness isn't necessarily, it's not the like official policy of the CCP. It's not sort of the same kind of institutional structural force the way it is in the United States, let's say, which doesn't mean that's not a problem, but it's important to understand, I guess, the distinctions. But it is also true that, yeah, I think overall China in the post-Mao era, their foreign policy has been some sort of like they're kind of the model for the third world of like successful development, and they can use that model as an alternative to whatever the IMF, and that's basically kind of their, I guess, strategic approach. But it doesn't mean that it's going to nobody's going to do for you what you need to do for yourself. I mean, the question is like, does China's development provide a fundamental obstacle to that? And that's something that I don't necessarily have an answer for. But
yeah, I want to we're going close to an hour, but I do want to in one of the previous episodes I talked about why I think black politics is largely dead in America, and I want to flesh that out more, because it's not I want to make like something that's recurring, but I just had some thoughts I wanted to sort of talk about, and then we'll kind of close out. Well, I think one factor is that the United States in general as a country is largely very atomized. So in terms of political mobilization, it's hard to galvanize people politically when everyone is living very, very atomized and alienated lives. So, and I think that has a role to play in terms of the development of a strong black body politic within the United States. One of my I watched this YouTube channel called Search for Uhuru. It's a really good YouTube channel, Pan-African YouTube channel. But there's one of the guests is Genesis, and one thing he keeps hitting on that I think it got me thinking. I think he's correct about this, which is that black people in America largely don't socialize. Like the socialization of Black America is what he says is largely like there's not a lot of socialization among Black people in America. And I think I agree with that, and I want to kind of expand upon that, because when you're talking about a sustained body politic, you have to have like a set of ingredients in order to make it work, right? So, one of my classes I took in college, I did a minor in Middle Eastern languages and culture. So like I remember taking a class, and I remember one of the papers I did research on that just stuck with me is the role that coffee houses played in the Egyptian revolution, because everyone socialized at the coffee house. So people had like political discussions, debates, all that, but the coffee house as a space was a social space, and that provided a breeding ground for political mobilization. In the same way that like when it comes to class struggle, the workplace is where workers socialize, because you're forced to work with each other, right? So you work with each other, you're under the same boss, you have the same wage, and you interact with each other. That kind of socialization can help breed a sense of common political interest. So if you're at the workplace, you realize, wait a minute, we're both getting screwed by the same boss, but we're also both getting screwed by the same industry. So that means we as workers should organize collectively for our own political interests, right? Hence,
usually takes a little bit longer than that.
Way longer. But I'm giving a very, very general, like, Reader's Digest. I'm trying to give a very Reader's Digest perspective of this. But yeah, it takes way longer than that. And it's not easy. Because there also are a lot of risks when it comes to politically organizing, especially in the workplace.
And also, you have to socialize with your boss and pretend that you like them.
Right. Yeah. So when it comes to Black America, I mean, like, okay, go back to slavery, right? Slaves had to socialize on the plantations, even on the slave ships, because we were forced to be together, right? Because in Africa, like, again, it's like there was over 40, it was like 46 different African ethnic groups that were taken during the transatlantic slave trade. So all those different African ethnic groups who previously had their own languages and customs in Africa were forced on these slave ships and taken to Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Cuba, Puerto Rico, United States, Jamaica, all throughout the Caribbean, Central America, right? So they were forced to talk to each other and be together on these slave ships, and then forced to work together and talk together on the plantations. And so this does not get appreciated enough, but there were a lot of slave rebellions. But the fact that, like, they all realized, like, wait, despite our differences in Africa, our linguistic differences, our tribal differences, one thing we do have in common is that, okay, we're all black. We're all of African lineage, and the people who are oppressing us all have white skin. They're the Europeans. They could be English, Dutch, French, Spanish, Portuguese, French, but that provided the ingredients you needed for slave rebellions, because the slaves realized that, like, wait a minute, while we're suffering, getting the shit beat out of us, whipped, tortured, and forced to work in the sun for nothing, for no wage at all, because as a slave, again, you're not getting paid anything. That's the definition of a slave. That was the kind of socialization you needed to form common political interests amongst slaves, right? So then after that, you go to the Jim Crow period. You had racial segregation, right? Black communities, black people were forced to be with each other because of segregation. We had no choice. By law in America, we were segregated in black communities. And so that created a breeding ground for, like, okay, there's a common set of black interests here because we're all here together, and we all realize, like, wait a minute, we're sick of, the kind of suffering we're experiencing under Jim Crow, racial segregation, and apartheid, right? So then you get black institutions that get built up to act on behalf of the political interests of the black community, right? NAACP, National Urban League, etc., etc., right? And also, even in the arts, Harlem Renaissance, right? The Harlem Renaissance, like, a lot of those artists were around during the same time as Marcus Garvey, the black national, the Garvey movement, black nationalism, right? So even if you look at some of the artwork and the poetry that was done at that time of the Harlem Renaissance, was still in conversation with black nationalism and black nationalistic political aspirations, right? So, I think when people, like, when black people say, like, integration destroyed black America, I don't think people miss the violence and the terrorism of Jim Crow, but what they do miss is, like, there were black communities and black people socialized with each other. After integration, what happened is that, okay, middle-class black people got enough money to leave the black community and go to the suburbs, right? And then also, I will say, like, what really, two systematic things that were outside of the control of the black community that really destroyed the socialization of black people, gentrification and the war on drugs. I think those two played a huge role in weakening the sort of the socialization and the grassroots sort of fertile ground that you needed to give rise to a black body politic. Because, when you start incarcerating millions and millions of black people, like, that disrupts black communities, because you take, like, people who could be, especially black men, you take fathers out of the community, you take fathers out of the household, you take male role models out of the community, then you put in drugs, and then you redline the black areas, and so they become poorer and poorer and poorer. Then there's a rise of street gangs. And so I think all these systematic factors have led to, I think, weakening the sort of grassroots socialization you need to provide a foundation for a sustainable black body politic. And I think like what I mean by like institutions, right? Um, like institutions like the media is an institution, right? Um, even during like I even remember this still as a kid. Like there were black newspapers and black magazines, Ebony, Jet, BET. I mean, BET got bought up by Viacom, but there was a point that BET was like their programming still reflected the interest of the black community. Like the earliest story I remember of police brutality I ever heard on the news when I was like, I think I was like 13 or I was young. I was like in my early teens. It was on BET, and they were covering police brutality in a way that the mainstream news wasn't covering it. Why? Because like it was a sustainable news channel and it answered directly to a black constituency. So they didn't have to care about what the New York Times thought or CNN thought. It's like, hey, this is a black news channel. We can say what the fuck we want. Who cares what the New York Times says? Who cares what CNN says? Who cares what NBC and all the other channels say? We're going to reflect black people's issues. And if you don't like it, you can fuck off, right? We don't have those kinds of media institutions in Black America. Black newspapers have diminished. Black book publishers have diminished. Like Oakland, California, which is not far from where I live, Marcus Bookstores is the oldest black-owned book publisher in the country. They used to have one in San Francisco. That shut down because of gentrification. So, I like gentrification. Is also like I think part of the problem with gentrification, like the displacement of black people from black areas and black neighborhoods, has led to basically like you're bleeding the like you're getting rid of all the people you need to give life and sustainability to these black institutions so that they can preserve black culture, not just for the current time but for the next generation, for like kids, grandkids, great grandkids, right? I mean, part of my politicization was because of I was raised in a strong black family, but also I was exposed to black institutions, black like books and media. That formed my political consciousness, right? So if that's gone and if that's weak, how is the next generation going to be politicized if you don't have that stuff? So in as someone who's been working in media, like it takes a lot of work and energy to maintain, especially media, because you need to hire people who edit, publish, and also do fucking investigative reporting. I mean, investigative reporting in America, period, regardless of black community or non-black community, is like has been gutted, right? There's barely any foreign reporting. Like a lot of overseas bureaus have been cut. So when it comes to the issues of that impact black people, police violence, gentrification, the health, especially look at the number of deaths of black people under COVID-19. We don't have institutions that can pay talented black writers a decent living so that they can do their job, which is to report on issues that impact black people. That doesn't exist. Like it's largely weak. The black media institutions we have are the root. The root really has no real investigative function at all. None. And is owned by Univision. So it's not even answering directly to the black community. It's part of a corporate conglomerate. So even the black stuff that they do publish still is filtered by a corporate media infrastructure that does not answer directly to the black community. So that means if they are filtered, there are going to be certain stories that they can't cover because, again, it's going to piss off someone at the top, right? So I just wanted to kind of explain that, and also I will say, just to kind of wrap this up, black politicians, like a lot of black politicians sound more like standard issue Democrats than black politicians, and here's what I mean: like the black politicians that are around aren't really lobbying on behalf of just black people, right? Like I like there aren't a lot of black politicians who would be like, hey, you know what, after Black Lives Matter, we need to have like a special prosecutor to investigate these police killings, right? Like I hardly see any black politicians do that. right? Like most of them sound like just standard issue Democrats. Like a lot of black politicians are basically like they are just saying the same thing that like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and all these standard Democrats are saying, right? Like they're just standard issue Democrats. That's not a black politician where you have a black politician advocate and lobby on behalf of black people, right? That's what I mean about the death of black politics. We don't have that. We have black people who have carved out their spot in the system, but that's not enough to sustain an independent, organic, organized black body politic that can lobby and fight on behalf of black people collectively and do so in a way. And when I say independent, like it's important for it to be independent because like if like let's say if like being a black journalist, you can work at like a white owned media company, right? You can still write about issues relating to race, but if you're working under a corporate media infrastructure, there are going to be certain things you can't say because you can't piss off the corporate heads, right? So they'll let you talk about race and police brutality, but you can't go too far. Otherwise, you're going to lose your job, right? Versus if you had an independent black media infrastructure, that wouldn't be an issue. You see what I'm saying? So it's like there is independent media, but a lot of it's for white people, right? Like, I mean, look, I love my indie lefty media publications, but that same infrastructure does not exist for the black community. And I think that's a huge problem. And even when it comes to nonprofits, like that's a whole other... That's also pretty touchy because even with nonprofits, you're still beholden to the liberal kind of donating class, and like some of them aren't.
They're honestly worse in a way because at least capitalists respond to ratings.
Yeah.
The nonprofits are very much in like we have a civilizing mission and we are giving you checks to carry it out. I think that's interesting that he made that point because when you said, I was like, huh. I always feel like there's always like black society of black entrepreneurs happy hour or whatever. There's always, and I was like, oh, he means like regular black people.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, regular
working class. Mm-hmm. The working class doesn't socialize.
Yeah,
but because the petty bourgeoisie, they always socialize.
Exactly. Yeah,
I was reading something about the future of Hollywood, and they're like, oh yeah, no, they're like. There's like Zoom calls to like 50 people of all the like, bigwigs or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, the ruling class socializes. They always will. It's always us. And like, whenever we get together, it's always a problem. And it is like, the closing of black social spaces, because it's also true that most black people don't live in the hood, right. But at the same time, like, places that were termed as the hood, I mean, what was important about them is that they were like they were the center for black people in that city. So even if you didn't live there, like that's where you would go to commune. Mm-hmm. As those places were, disinvested and then destroyed or gentrified, right? Mm-hmm. Then those spaces get lost, and now we have Twitter, which is taking this place, and that's taking the place of coffee houses, and that's part of the reason anyone's on it. But imagine like if the moment you walked into the black bookstore, there was just like an FBI person just standing right there, and he was just there all the time. I mean, and like there's also somebody else who would find the most ignorant thing anyone said and then just repeat it on a megaphone outside for the entire street to hear. I mean, that's basically what Twitter is. Yeah. So, for fomenting politics, it's really the worst possible tool for the people.
And the reason why like that point stuck with me, because I see it in Oakland, because I was just thinking about like growing up in the Bay Area, like 20 years ago, Oakland was a black city, not just in numbers, but in terms of culture and socialization. Like Oakland was like the black area, right? So now when I go to Oakland, like it's still black, but it's like the black culture is because of gentrification, it's kind of going away. Same with San Francisco. I mean, there are parts of San Francisco that were very black. People forget. The Fillmore district in San Francisco was considered Harlem of the West in the 50s. Like, it was a...
I think they still say that. And the last time I was there, they have all the signs and stuff.
Yeah, but the thing is like, I mean, Fillmore is still black, but the rest of San Francisco is not. Like, dude, man, having gone to University of San Francisco like 2.5 years, like, I would take the BART and the bus to USF, and like, I can just see it just walking around San Francisco. It's like, it's a very white city. Like, it's kind of sad because I remember San Francisco being like a very eclectic, multicultural city. So like, you had strong black communities, but you also had very strong Asian communities, very strong Latino communities. You had like hippie white people, but like, these are all pretty like, if you were Asian, like there is still like a strong sense of Asian community. Particularly, I mean, this is going really deep, but like, there are Asian families that have been in San Francisco for generations, like going back to the late 1800s, right? A lot of Latinos, particularly like in the Mission District, right? Like, you had strong ethnic communities in San Francisco, but like, now when I go to San Francisco, it feels like fucking Coachella. Like, it's not like the kind of multiculturalism, not in like a sort of cheap Benetton ad fucking culture multiculturalism, but like an actual kind of real organic bottom up multiculturalism where like, you had strong communities of different groups of people. You had you had Asians, and you had like a lot of Filipinos, Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese in one area, but like they had a strong community. A lot of Latinos, like Mexicans, Salvadorans, Guatemalans, strong black community. But like, even if you would still go to the same school district and like see each other. So like, you have like, I mean, I can go through my yearbook, and you can see the kind of natural diversity in my yearbook, like Tongans, Samoans, Filipinos, Mexicans, Salvadorians, Nicaraguans, blacks. Like, that was a huge part of, and still is part of Bay Area culture. But gentrification, especially as it relates to black politics, yeah, like, you're right, Peter, about that distinction, because, yeah, the black kind of bourgeoisie, they socialize, like, kind of like, fraternities, Jack and Jill societies, that kind of shit, right? Like, they socialize, but regular everyday black people, the infrastructure you need to sustain black spaces and black community, like, have been weakened. And I think people forget about that when it comes to politics, because that's why I talked about, like, why I said about America being a very atomized society, because like, if people are atomized, how can you mobilize politically if you're just all separate and everyone just for themselves, right? If you're all together in like public spaces or anywhere, it's easier to politically mobilize, because once you start interacting with people, you realize, wait, we have similar political interests and similar political ideas, right? Or you may have like different ideas, but you can kind of like synthesize them in the same space, right?
And also something to consider, how many black people live in the kind of Sunbelt cities that are completely hostile to any form of public space, like
exactly.
Houston or any southern city, any city that was built up post-war. So that's, I think, people forget that, like, a lot of black people just like live in like strip mall areas.
Yeah,
but
we're
at 119. So
yeah, I just want to.
So this one was kind of all over the place, but thank you for bearing with us.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of explain, because I was talking to a few people about it, and I wanted to explain it more, because I feel like American culture, like I don't think we're really good at talking about what it means to have like an organic body politic. And I think, like, especially, because there have been polls that have shown that, like, when it comes to Biden and Trump, so far, like, Biden and Trump are kind of neck and neck in the polls, and a lot of non-white voters are, like, either not voting or the support for Biden is weakening. And, like, and one thing I kind of get frustrated with, like, sort of mainstream media discussions about black people is that, like, if you're not really familiar with the black community and how it's structured, it's hard to understand black people's political decisions. And I will say, I forgot to add, but like, I mean, the church was always a black institution, right? Because a lot of black people go to church.
It was the only one.
It was
the
only
the only place black people could meet.
Yeah. Hence why a lot of black leaders during the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King was a reverend, Malcolm X was some preacher, right? So like, religious institutions. I was talking to a student of mine, like I think earlier this year. She's actually a black minister, and she was telling me about like how there are less black people that go to church, and she said part of the factor was gentrification. Like it's hard for the churches to maintain themselves in light of gentrification. So like there's all these like systematic factors that are undermining the black community's ability to collectively organize. So when you don't have that, like it's hard to sustain any real organic independent political body politic. And I think the only kind of black politics that exists is usually like Democratic Party, nonprofits, corporate media, and also academia. So, and it's like if that's the extent of black politics, then like I'm not that that does not give me a lot of hope. But yeah, I wanted to explain that and flesh that out because I think it might be something that we might come back to.
Because that problem's gonna solve itself, and we won't have anything to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're done. It's been long enough.
We really do need a good sign off, but it's not. It has to happen organically.
Yeah. We'll get better at it.
Until then, don't let the virus get you down.
Yeah. All right.